All right, Chavra Zoom, you still hear me all right? Excellent. All right, Rabbi, say good morning, good morning. Let us begin a beautiful, beautiful daf ahead of us today. Begin by thanking all of our sponsors. So thank our Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Teves, the Daf Yomi Shir, in memory of Mr. Milton Martyr Mordechai David ben Rafal Kohen Zichron Livracha, and to thank the Elbaum Mishpacha for dedicating all of his Shurman this month in commemoration of the yard site of Jerry Elbaum Yaakov couple Ben Rabbi Avram Menachem. We hope that in the merit of our Talmud Torah, the Neshamas will have an aliyah, and the families Einacham. I will say also, I'll mention, I sent out yesterday on the Daf Yomi chat just a link to a Siyum Mishnayos for Mr. Martyr. So if you have the ability to sign up, it's actually broken up by prakim, so you don't even have to take an entire Masechta. But if you can take a parak of Mishnayos, that would be an incredible schus for the mishpacha. All right, I will say, so let us begin. Let us begin. So we'll say, so today's daf is daf pay 80. And we are picking up, where are we picking up? Okay. So, udvarim she'ein b'hem inui nefesh. So we are picking up 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 15 lines up from the bottom. So if you remember again, we made an interesting distinction in yesterday's daf, towards the end of yesterday's daf, between what we called, let's take one more step back. The Mishnah, so after we spent the entire last parak, the 10th parak, speaking about the concept of hafara, the ability of a husband, we'll just focus on the husband right now, the ability of a husband to annul his wife's vows. So we then transitioned in this parak to talking about, well, what type of vows does the husband have the ability to annul? So the Mishnah introduced us to the concept of inui nefesh, what we'll call a nedarim that are afflictive in nature. Okay, so we'll say, so that concept, so we had a machlokes in the Mishnah between Rabbi Yossi and Tanna Kama as to what is the definition of an afflictive neder. Fine. We'll say, then we also brought in the conversation, and we're going to talk about this more today, to speak about what we call dvarim beino lebeino. Right? Literally, again, nedarim that ultimately impact the marital relationship. And a husband has the ability to annul those as well. So wherein lies the distinction? So I will say what the Gemara wanted to suggest was as follows. The Gemara wanted to suggest that when a husband goes ahead and annuls nedarim that are inui nefesh, that annulment is forever. When he annuls nedarim that are beino lebeino, right, nedarim that impact the marriage, that annulment is only valid for when? As long as they're married. But should the marriage terminate, ultimately, again, the neder will automatically kind of come back into effect. So the Gemara says, is that true? So when you told me about, so the Gemara is calling this, so nedarim that don't have inui nefesh. What's a neder that doesn't have inui nefesh? What's a neder? That's dvarim shebeino lebeino. Just remember these two categories. Inui nefesh, afflictive nedarim, and dvarim shebeino lebeino, which means literally, again, a neder which governs matters between husband and wife, marital items. So we'll say, we're going to see what that covers. That can include intimacy, that can include a variety of different things. So is that true? That dvarim she'ein b'hem inui nefesh, which means nedarim that are beino lebeino, ki megarish lo chayle Allah, that when they divorce, and they're no longer married, those nedarim do come into effect. Is that true? Vatran, we learned, Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri says, Yafer shema yigashenu te'asuralo. So we'll say, what's this case? Take a look at the Ran. So we'll say Ran, right hand side. So if you go straight across in the Ran, about 6 lines up, Vatnan, Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri Omer Yafer. This is very interesting. So Masnisini B'Hai Pirka. So we'll say this actually is going to be we're going to see this Mishnah in a couple of days. So listen to this. V'katani Reisha, konam she'eni osa al picha, eno tzarech lahafer. So we'll say, listen to this. Let's say a woman makes a neder. What's her neder? She says, I make a neder that my husband is not permitted to benefit from anything from me. Okay, so she's saying, my husband can't benefit. So I cook, he can't benefit. I make money, he can't benefit. He can't get benefit from anything that's mine. So what's talacha? Eno tzarech lahafer. Husband does not have to annul that neder. Why? Daha mishabdole. Because ultimately, again, her maisei yadayim, her earnings, right? They're meshubah to him. he already has a claim on them. Therefore, her neder cannot go ahead and undermine his claim. And ultimately, again, Chazal said the shibud, right? The rights that a husband has to his wife's ma'aseh yadayim are stronger. Shelo yafke'enu konam, that a neder can't override them. Fine, so that's the halacha Rabbi. So a woman makes a neder, I make a neder prohibiting my earnings to my husband, it doesn't work. It doesn't work because his claim is stronger than her neder. Fine, now watch this. However, Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri Omer Yafer, Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri says still, he should annul the neder. Why? Shimlo Yafer Yachol HaNeder Kishigashena. Because if he does not annul the neder, then I will say, what's going to happen? If they divorce, the neder will ultimately come into effect. Alma basar gerishin lo chal nedra. So we'll say, what do you see from here? You see from here that when a husband annuls a neder, so we'll say, here's the case. Right? Rachel says to Reuven, I'm making a neder that you can't get any benefits from my earnings. So what's the halacha? Does Reuven need to annul the neder? No. Why? His claim is stronger than her neder. Rabbi Yochanan says, you're right, but you really should annul it. Because if you don't annul it, if they go out and divorce, the neder will come into effect, right? And then what's going to happen? It may preclude him from remarrying her. Fine, so just therefore annul it now. But what do you see? You see from here that when you annul it now, that annulment works for when? Even after marriage. Rabbi, what is this a case of? This is not a case. This is a case of dvarim beino lebeina. And yet, what do you see? That if you annul it now, the annulment works even after the marriage. That contradicts what we just said before. We said before that when it comes to inui nefesh, if you annul it now, it remains in effect forever. Or in other words, the annulment remains in effect. But dvarim shebeino lebeina, if you annul it now, if they're no longer married, the rebounds. We see from here that even dvarim shebeino lebeina, if you annul it during the marriage, that annulment remains in effect even should the marriage dissolve. Incredible. To which the Gemara says, Alma, back to the Gemara, kimegarish la umeifer la meikara havyafara. So you see from here that even dvarim shebeino lebeina, when you go ahead and you annul during marriage, that annulment remains even in the event that the marriage dissolves. So we'll say, so what's the distinction? So here we go. Amri. Halin v'halin havyafara. The truth is, I will say, so a husband, remember again, let's establish what we know. What we establish is a husband has the power of hafara over two types of nedarim. Remember again, what two types? I will say, let's get this clear. What two types? Number one, inui nefesh, afflictive nedarim. And number two, dvarim shebeino lebeina. Right? Now, that second category we haven't defined yet, but let's just go with it. Right? So matters that are between him and her, i.e. marital matters. So he can know both of them. So where's the distinction? Here we go. Elenidri inui nefesh mefer bein liatzmo bein la'achirim. So I will say, when it comes to inui nefesh, if a husband annuls that neder is annulled forever. Now I will say, what does forever mean? Forever means 3 stages of life. What are the 3 stages? Number 1, if they're married. Number 2, if they get divorced. And number 3, even if she remarries. Right, Olam Haba, right? Very beautiful, right? Very good. Right, so again, all 3 stages. So when he annuls it, it's annulled when they're married. It's still annulled in the event of divorce, and still annulled if she remarries someone else. That's the power of annulling an afflictive neder. Conversely, the Gemara ain't inui nefesh. Nedarim will say which don't have inui nefesh, i.e., dvarim shebeino lebeina. If he annuls that, when is that annulled? Right? Liatzmo mefer la'achirim eino mefer. So we'll say if the husband annuls that, it's annulled when? During marriage. It's also annulled when? After during divorce, as long as she hasn't remarried anyone. But the moment she remarries someone else, that neder rebounds. So we'll say take a quick look at the rush. Look at the rush. So we'll say, so if you look at the rush, it's 4 about 6 lines before the rush gets wide. Listen to this. Ela nidre inui nefesh mefer bein liatzmo bein la'achirim. Bein liatzmo means kozman shu tachtav. She tachtav. So we'll say, so ultimately, again, if it's inui nefesh and he annuls that neder, that annulment is in effect as long as they're married. Bein liachirim im tiskarish v'tinasi la'acher. And we'll say that annulment remains in effect, even if they divorce, and even if she marries someone else. Go weiter in the Ran. Ein bahen inui nefesh, first white line, li'atzmo mefer, kilomar, kolma deshayech li'atzmo havi afaras afara, kolzban shitachtav, ubeinim gar shevech zira. So I say, Salach l'maisa, if it's dvarim shebeino lebeina, so, and he annuls that neder during marriage, that annulment remains during marriage, that annulment even remains during divorce, and even remains in effect should they remarry. Hilchach im girsha kolzman shiruya lashav elav lo chal haneder. Aval in nises la'acher chal haneder. But if she remarries someone else, then lemaisa the neder rebounds. The lo mistaber lemeimer sheyachal haneder miyad. So I'll say so again. So halach lemaisa. Here's what the Gemara is suggesting, and it's quite fascinating. Husband has annulment power over two different types of nedarim. Inui nefesh, afflictive, dvarim shebeino lebeina, matters which are marital matters. He has the power to annul those types of nedarim. But there is a distinction between these two forms of annulment. If he annuls inui nefesh, that annulment is forever. Forever. No matter what their relationship is, married, divorced, married to someone else, doesn't make a difference, the annulment stands. Dvarim shebeino lebeina, marital nedarim. So we'll say essentially the annulment only works when they're married, even when they're divorced, as long as she hasn't married someone else. Which I will say. So what's the logic here? So it makes sense. The ability to annul dvarim shebeino lebeina so applies. Remember again, that's based on the fact that this neder impacts their marriage. So the ability to annul that neder only applies so long as there is some level of marital bond. When is there a marital bond between Reuven and Rachel? It's very interesting. When is there a marital bond between them? When they're married, obviously. But even when they're divorced, as long as she has not married someone else, he could remarry her. Okay, if he's a Kohen, he can't marry her, but fine. But leaving that aside, right? So there's a marital bond. It's very interesting. Even when they're divorced, there's still a quasi-marital bond. Therefore, the hafara remains. However, once she remarries, and there's absolutely no semblance of marital bond between them anymore, then ultimately, again, the hafara he did for the dvarim shebeino lebeina is no longer valid, and therefore the neder rebounds. So it turns out, something very interesting, it turns out that a husband's ability to be mefer, to annul a neder in dvarim shebeino lebeina, it's not really an annulment, right? What is it? It's a neder suppressant. A neder suppressant. So it's quite fascinating. So the neder never to see when he annuls a neder of inui nefesh, the neder is gone. The neder is gone. It's no longer. It's batal mavutal. It doesn't make a difference. When he annuls dvarim shebeino lebeina, he's suppressing the neder, and that's fine. The suppressant works just fine as long as there's a marital bond between the two of them. But the moment there's no longer a marital bond is the moment the suppressant is lifted, and ultimately what? The neder rebounds into reality. It's quite fascinating. This is what it means to say. I will say, so this is what the Mishnah means to say. These are the nedarim that a husband has the ability to annul both for himself and for others, which means this is the type of annulment where if the husband goes ahead and does it, it applies to every single stage, whether she's married to him or married to someone else. What type of nedarim? So nedarim sheishman inui nefesh, afflictive nedarim. So I'll say a really fascinating distinction that the Gemara is making right now between inui nefesh and ultimately dvarim shebeino lebeina. Inui nefesh, if he annuls it, annulment is forever. Dvarim shebeino lebeina, the annulment or the suppressant is only in effect so long as there is some level of marital bond between them. Incredible. Let's go back there. So remember again, the Mishnah now. So now we're going to get into the examples of the Mishnah. The Mishnah gave an interesting example. What was, according to Tanakama, what was a neder of inui nefesh? Im erchatz, im lo erchatz. If I bathe, if I don't bathe. So the Gemara says, okay, echi ka'amar, what's the neder? What's the neder? So this is quite fascinating. Ilema da'amra konem peris olam alayim erchatz. So let's say a woman says, here's the neder. All of the fruit of the world should be usher to me if I bathe. So the Gemara says, lama lahafara, why should that be annullable? Lo tirchatz v'lo yisram peris, just don't bathe. Just don't bathe. Okay, now we'll say, the Gemara, you're going to see is a very interesting havamina. There, for some reason, there's a havamina that not bathing maybe is not afflictive. Maybe it's not afflictive, right? So the Gemara says, Ella, I'm sorry, olam elu Allah. V'od, b'halim Rabbi Yossi ein elu nidre inui nefesh. So we'll say, how could Rabbi Yossi say that this is not a case of inui nefesh? Dilma rachza v'isru peros olam Allah. It would be inui nefesh. Why? Because there's a possibility that she's going to bathe, and what happens if she bathes? Then all of the fruit of the world becomes prohibited to her. So that is inui nefesh. But we'll say top of pay. Ve'ela. So we'll say, so what's the case? We're just trying to figure out. Remember again, the Mishnah gave an example of a neder of inui nefesh. We're just trying to figure out what neder is being made here. Ve'ela da'amra konam hanaas rechitza alai li olam im erchatz. Heather will say, here's what she says. Very interesting neder. She says, the pleasure of bathing should be usher to me if I bathe. If I bathe. In other words, so if I bathe, I shouldn't be able to bathe ever again. So the first act of bathing technically is permitted. It just triggers an ongoing neder against bathing. So the Gemara says, Mishum hachi meifer la. So we'll say, because of this neder is annullable. Why? Tehechi tavid. What should she do in this type of situation? Tirchas, if she washes, mitzira hanaas rechitza Allah. So we'll say, if she washes, then she forbids bathing upon herself for the rest of her life. Now that's inui, right? That's afflictive in nature. Lo tirchatz, but even not bathing, so ultimately again, isla nivula. Ultimately, again, we'll say that's disgusting, right? That's disgusting. See, either way, she's stuck, right? We'll see, you hear the challenge. If she bathes, then she remember again, so the case we're assuming over here, she makes a neder. The neder is, if I bathe, ultimately again, bathing will become prohibited to me. So she's stuck. If she bathes, then she triggers the neder against bathing, which obviously again compromises her. If she doesn't bathe and therefore avoids triggering the neder, she's not bathing, and that's compromising her. So the Tanna Kama says this is a good example of inui nefesh, of an afflictive neder, and therefore the husband has the right to go ahead and annul it. So what's the machlokes? So Rabbi Yossi says, Efshar delo rachza. No, don't bathe. Don't bathe. And ultimately, again, you'll be fine. You'll be fine without bathing. In other words, you know, Lamaisa, again, she'll extra perfume or extra cosmetics, and she'll be just fine. He says, I'm not worried about nivu. So we'll say, so according to Gemara right now, that's the machlokes. So that the neder we're talking about over here is what makes a neder. I hereby make a neder. If I bathe, if I bathe, right, ultimately, again, all further bathing should be asrami. Tanna Kama says, okay, so this is a case of inui nefesh. If she does bathe, she's in trouble. If she doesn't bathe, she's in trouble. This inui nefesh husband has the ability to go ahead and annul. Rabbi Yossi just argues on the definition of inui nefesh and holds lack of bathing is not inui nefesh. Is not inui nefesh. Right? They will say, by the way, because also there may be other workarounds with it. In other words, she has to cross a river to get from one place to another. So she's getting wet, but she's not bathing, so to speak. Okay, in any event, suppose that's the machlokes. Iachi, listen, Iachi. We'll say if that's the case, then why doesn't the Mishnah read as follows? It should say, Iachi, listen, Iachi. Rabbi Yossi Omer, T'nai ze ein boi inui nefesh. So I will say, the way you're framing it is what's the machlokes Rabbi Yossi and the Tanna Kama in the Mishnah? What's the machlokes Rabbi Yossi and the Rabbanon? Like the definition of inui nefesh. So let Rabbi Yossi just say, by the way, okay guys, I agree with you in principle, but your example is not a good one. Your example is not a good one. Yeah, we're all on the same page that a husband has the ability to annul his wife's nedarim. For if the neder creates inui nefesh, what I disagree with you is that bathing, or I should say lack of bathing, inability to bathe, is not inui nefesh. So just say that. Just say that. To which the Gemara will say, Rabbi, you have to say, both say, if we take a look at the Ran for just a moment, the Ran is the third wide line, the widest lines in. Ihachi, listen, Ihachi, Rabbi Yossi Omer, T'nai ze ein bo mishum inui nefesh. Perush Rabbeinu Yonah, dahashta detana ein elu nidre inui nefesh, mashma, t'mishum she'ein haneder inui nefesh lo yafer. Aval inodra midi de ispe inui nefesh yafer, v'lesa decheven de betinoa lekinish. So I'll say, what the Ran is pointing out over here is, the way the Mishnah is set up is, it sounds like what Rabbi Yossi is arguing on is on the nature of the neder being made, not necessarily the substance of the neder. But if all Rabbi Yossi is arguing on is that the Tanna Kama holds that not bathing is inui nefesh, Rabbi Yossi holds that not bathing is not inui nefesh, just say that. Just say that. Rather, the Gemara, listen to this, what I'll say. The Gemara says, rather, yeah, good. Fine. Ella, so So here we are, 3 lines are from the bottom, Pam with Aleph, 3, right? 80A, 3 lines are from the bottom. Ella, the Amra, Hanas Rechitza Laili Olam, Im Erchatz Hayom. Oh, this is very interesting, I will say. So what's the case? Here we go. Here's the neder. Here's the neder. I will say, follow this. Woman says, I hereby prohibit bathing upon myself forever if I bathe today. If I bathe today. So I will say, what is she limiting for herself in neder? In neder, what is she limiting for herself? Bathing today. So it's Friday. If I bathe today, ultimately, again, bathing will become usher to me forever. Forever. So we'll say, what does she need to do in order to avoid triggering the neder? Bathe on Thursday, bathe on Motzei Shabbos. Just don't bathe today. Just don't bathe today. Okay, so I will say, so now I understand this. So the Rabbanon will say, oh, this is called Nidre Inui Nefesh. So because, right, not bathing is called Inui Nefesh, therefore he could annul it. Now we'll say, what does Rabbi Yossi hold? This is incredible. Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yossi said, last line, Pei Amud Aleph, what does Rabbi Yossi hold? Nivel Dechad Yoma, Lo Shmei Nivel. Oh, okay. Now, what does Rabbi Yossi say? Rabbi Yossi says, listen, I agree with you that a neder that a long-term neder that prohibits bathing is absolutely inui nefesh. Rabbi Yossi will say, what's not inui nefesh? Not bathing for a day. Not bathing for a day is not inui nefesh. Therefore, Rabbi Yossi will hold, because the neder really only governs one day, the prohibition is only one day, that's not called inui nefesh. So we'll say, quite fascinating. So now let's go back to Mishnah. Here we go, one more time. So we'll say, so the woman's making a neder. What's her neder? I make a neder prohibiting bathing upon myself forever. If what? If I bathe today. Tanakama says, oh, inui nefesh. Because not bathing is afflictive in nature, and therefore a husband could be made for it. Rabbi says, no. Not bathing for a day is not afflictive. Not bathing for a day is not inui nefesh. So because it's not inui nefesh, therefore a husband doesn't have the right to go ahead and annul it. Incredible. That's the machlokes. So we'll say, I'm a base. Shenis. So we'll say, so now, remember again. So I'm sorry. Shanis im erchatz. Im lo erchatz hechidami. So we'll say, so remember again, there's 2 parts to the Mishnah. Right? What are the 2 parts of the Mishnah? The lashon of the Mishnah was erchatz im lo erchatz. Right? In other words, so the lashon of the Mishnah, so again, so now shanis means, I will say, we've explained the first case of im erchatz. Right? So the neder is, I hereby take a neder that if I bathe today, bathing should become usher to me forever. Tanakama, that's inui nefesh, therefore a husband can be made for it. Rabbi Yossi, not bathing for one day is not inui nefesh, therefore a husband can't annul it. Fine. What's the case in lo erchatz hechidami? What's the neder will say of if I don't bathe? What's that case? In lo erchatz hechidami. So here we go. Alima da amra. So ilema da amra. Titzar hanaas rechitza li olam alai im lo erchatz hayom. So I'll say, so ultimately again, if she says that ultimately again that tissar hanas rechitza li olam alai im lo erchatz hayom. If I don't bathe today, then ultimately again bathing should become usher for me forever. So we'll say, so here this is the opposite. If I don't bathe today, then bathing should be usher to me forever. Then lama lahafara. Why should that neder require annulment? After all, what should she do? I will say, what should she do? Tisachi, bathe. Just bathe. We'll say, remember again, in this case, the neder is only taking effect if she doesn't bathe. So no problem. This doesn't require hafara, just bathe. So Rabbi Yehuda will say, what's the case? Very interesting. The Amra, Hanas rechitza alai li olam, im lo erchatz b'mei mishra. So we'll say, this is absolutely fascinating. What's the case? The case will say where she says, bathing should be usher to me forever if I don't bathe in flax water. Flax water. Then I will say, what's flax water? So if you take a look at the Ran is second line down from the top. Imlo erchatz mishra, mayim sheshorn b'pishna. So I will say, this is water in which you would soak flax. Shein sruchin b'yosin. I will say, what's the halachah of flax water? The halachah of flax water is to soften the flax, and ultimately, again, the flax itself begins to decompose within the water. Flax water is disgusting. It's disgusting. So I'll say, so now watch this. The heichi tavid. So I'll say, so now here's the problem. So watch this case. She makes an neder and she says, bathing should become usher to me forever if I don't bathe in flax water today. Or if I don't bathe in flax water. So we'll say, so now watch this. What are our options? Let's go through this. What are our options? Option number one, bathe in flax water. Right? What is that? Disgusting. Right? Option number two, not bathe in flax water. Then what happens? She's never allowed to bathe again. What is that? Disgusting. Right? So either way, I would say her options are disgusting. Right? So either way, bathing in flax water, disgusting. Not bathing, disgusting. Oh, what do we call that? What do you call that? I will say, don't say disgusting. Right? What do you call that? Inui nefesh. Inui nefesh. So we'll say, so that's the case in the Mishnah of lo erchatz. Right? So in other words, again, if I don't bathe in flax water, bathing should become usher to me. So because both of her options are disgusting in that situation, that's called inui nefesh, and therefore husband has the ability to annul such a neder. To which the Gemara says, dekavase diktani, a similar, so remember again, the second example the Mishnah gave of inui nefesh was eskashet velo eskashet. If I adorn myself, don't adorn myself. So what's the case? Dekavase diktani, Im loes kashet benaft. So we'll say, so for example, let's say she says, right, I will become usher in using cosmetics and adorning myself if I don't adorn myself in naft. Now we'll say naft oil is a type of oil. Now naft oil has a very foul odor. So we'll say it's a similar case. What happens? She says, if I don't adorn myself in naft oil, don't smear myself in naft oil, ultimately again, adorning myself with cosmetics will become usher. So we'll say, what are options in that case? Disgusting and disgusting. So that's a good case of afara. To which the Gemara says, that doesn't make any sense. So the Gemara says, lichlochu. You can't use lashon of iskashet by naft oil. Right? We'll say, by definition, the lashon of iskashet means adorning yourself in a way which beautifies the woman. Smearing naft oil on yourself, by definition, is not the beautification. Therefore, you can't use that lashon. So therefore, again, as I said, the Gemara, you're right. Amar Rav Yehuda, actually, I think it's changed to Rabbi. It says Rabbi, right? Just want to find the base. Yeah, Rava, sorry. So Rava. So Amar Rava, the Amra, Hanas Rechitza li Olam Alai, Im Erchatz Hayom. So we'll say, so rather, Rava says like this. Mishnah is actually advancing two different cases. We'll say, by the way, I just want to point out, in this case over here, we're not arguing. There's no concepts being debated over here. We're just trying to figure out what the case is. Right? Erchatz, lo erchatz, eskashet, lo eskashet. Just want to know what the case is. So we'll say, Rava advances something very interesting. Rava says, the Amra, listen to this, the Amra, Hanas rechitza li olam alai im erchatz hayom. So we'll say, the first case we already have down, right? The first case of erchatz is bathing should be usher to me forever if I bathe today. That's the positive case. Im erchatz. And therefore, again, that's inui nefesh. Therefore, it could be annulled. So we'll say, what's the case of lo erchatz? Shvua shelo erchatz. A woman takes a shvua that I will not bathe. Now, I will say, we have not spoken about this at all. The ability of a husband to be mefer his wife's shvua. Ooh, we've never heard that before. But apparently it's true. But apparently, if a wife makes an oath, so Lamaisa, again, a husband has the ability to annul that oath. So it turns out that the Mishnah is teaching me two concepts. The case of erchatz, the positive, is talking about a neder. A woman takes a neder. If I bathe today, so ultimately, again, if I bathe today, bathing should be asra upon me forever. That's a case of inui nefesh, and therefore halacha, my husband has the ability to annul it. What's the case of lo erchatz? It's not a neder. She takes a shvua. I swear I'm never going to bathe. That's inui nefesh, an afflictive shvua, and therefore a husband has the ability to annul it. Similarly, hanos kishut alay li olam imes kashet hayom. We'll say, what's the case of kishut, of adorning? So again, she takes a neder, right? The benefit of adorning myself should be usher to me forever if I adorn myself today. So we'll say, what's talacha? That's a neder that has inui nefesh, and therefore what? Husband has the ability to annul it. Shvua shelo es kashet. So we'll say the negative would be, husband takes a shvua, I swear that I'm not going to adorn myself. I swear that I'm not going to adorn myself. I'm sorry, not husband. Wife takes a neder. I swear I'm not going to adorn myself. husband has the ability to annul that shvua. Good. So we'll say, so now it turns out that what? That halacha l'maisa, the positive and the negative are two different cases. The positive is ultimately, again, a case of a neder, and it's a neder of inui nefesh. Therefore, a husband has the ability to annul it. And ultimately, the shvua case also is what? A case of a shvua, where she takes a shvua, I'm not going to do something that has afflictive nature as well. Husband has the ability to annul it. Beautiful. So here's the problem. Only Ravina Ravashi, Hai elu nedarim ushvus mi ba'ilei misni. I will say if that's the case, the Mishnah should have read differently. I will say, remember again, how does the Mishnah read? Ve'elu nedarim shumefer. These are the nedarim that a husband has the ability to annul. If we're setting up the Mishnah the way you just said it, then how should the Mishnah read? These are what? These are the nedarim and the shvuas that ultimately, again, the nedarim and the shvuas that a husband has the ability to annul. Why not add them both? To which the Gemara says, you're right, Amalei, Tanu Elu Nedarim Ushvuos. We'll say first answer is you're right. Change the Mishnah, and the Mishnah should read, these are the Nedarim and the Shvuos. Okay, so that's an easy answer. The other possibility is Shvuos Nami Hainu Nedarim. We'll say is great, a little bit of a throwback to the beginning of the Masechta. The other possibility we'll say is Shvuos are also called Nedarim. Right? In other words, the word neder abosai is an overarching word that can mean both nedarim as well as shvuos. Where do we learn this? Disnan. We'll say, remember again, if a person used the following lashon, kinidre rishayim. We'll say, remember again, this takes us back to our concept of yados and kinuyim. Right? Remember again, a yad, a partial term, right? Ultimately a kinui, an equivalent term. So as we had this example, let's say a person used the lashon of kinidre rishayim. That's what he says. I literally say, right, it should be kinidre rishayim. So I'll say, if you say that lashon, ultimately, again, what are you affecting? So the Gemara says it depends. So neder, ben nazir, or bekarban. So I'll say it's possible. If a nazir is walking by, and I say kinidre rishayim, I will say, what have I just done? I've taken upon myself a neder nazirus. If someone else just made a neder, I made a neder not to eat bread, and I say, like Reuven said, Reuven made a neder not to eat bread, and I say, kinidre rishayim, we'll say, what have I done? I've just piggybacked onto his neder. So we'll say, the idea over here is, remember, this goes back to the idea that rishayim make nedarim, tzaddikim do not make nedarim. Right? That's what's driving this lashon over here. And furthermore, again, b'shvua. We'll say ultimately again, nidre rishayim could also, if somebody made a shvua and I say kinidre rishayim, I take upon myself that same shvua. We'll say, so the point over here is, what do you see from here? That lashon of neder ultimately includes shvua. Therefore, I will say it's not a stira. The fact that our Mishnah says v'elu, what was the lashon of the Mishnah? V'elu nedarim shum mefer. These are the nedarim that the husband is mefer for his wife. The Mishnah could also include cases of shvua, cases of an oath, and it's not a stira, it's not a contradiction. Why? Because the lashon of neder could also include shvuas. Incredible. V'am Rabbanon. So we'll say now. So now watch this. V'am Rabbanon. Now Chazal said. So the following. Chazal said. V'am Rabbanon. Rechitza isba inui nefesh. So we'll say kilo rachza. So we'll say. So now listen to this. Now did Chazal actually say V'am Rabbanon? Rechitza isba nefesh kilo rachza? Do Chazal Rabbi say, so let's take a step back. So now we've established the case of the Mishnah. It's always good to reflect on your accomplishments. So we'll say, so what do we have over here? We have over here that halacha, what's the case of the Mishnah? Case of the Mishnah is, im erchatz is a case where a woman says, if I bathe today, I can't bathe forever. Lo erchatz, shvua, that I won't bathe. Right? Eskashet, I take a neder, a woman takes a neder, if I adorn myself today, right, then adornment shall become asr forever. Shvua, shalo eskashet. So those are inui nefesh. And therefore, halacha l'maisa, husband has the ability to annul this neder. Husband has the ability to annul this shvua. Now, I will say what's interesting over here is all of this is predicated on the idea that Chazal hold that not bathing is inui nefesh. Not bathing. So Gemara says, "Vam Rabbanon rechitze ispe inui nefesh kilo rachza." So ultimately, not bathing is inui nefesh or minhi. So let's raise a kasha. So I'll say this. So this is very interesting. So is that true? Is that true that not bathing is inui nefesh? Do the Rabbanon really hold that way? And I will say, now watch this. This is fascinating. Or I'm going to raise a kasha. Here we go. Afa pisha asur bekulan was Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur, even though on Yom Kippur you are asur to do all of these practices, I'm saying what's asur on Yom Kippur? Eating, drinking, achila shtia, tashmish shamita relations, nila sasandal, wearing shoes, and rechitza, bathing. So I was saying, I watch this. Even though all of these things are asur, ein anush karis ela ba'ochel v'shosa va'osa malacha bilbad. The only thing you get karis for, Rabbi says what? The only thing you get karis for is eating, drinking, and doing malacha. Now, here's the question. V'i amrit kilo rachsa ika inui ine b'yam kippurim. So I'll say, if you say that ultimately, again, not bathing is inui, if that's the case, ki rachatz lichayev karis. So I'll say, now watch this. If you hold that ultimately bathing is a form of pleasure, not bathing is a form of inui, a form of affliction. So remember again, I'll say, what's the halacha on Yom Kippur? Ve'inisim es atzmechem, right? The obligation on Yom Kippur is inui, is affliction. And therefore, the same way that if you eat or drink, meaning you're no longer denying yourself affliction, you're chayiv kares. So if not bathing is a form of affliction, then what should be the halacha? If you bathe on Yom Kippur, what should be the halacha? Kares. But yet we see that that's not the case. If you bathe on Yom Kippur, it's asr, but it's not kares. So obviously, what do you see from that, Rabbi? What do you see from that? That not bathing is not real inui. And if not bathing is not real inui, plugging that back into our Mishnah, if a wife makes a neder not to bathe, then what? Husband shouldn't have the right to go ahead and annul that neder. Take a quick look at the Rabbi say. Ki rachas d'chayv kares, d'haloma ani nafshei. Right? If not bathing is real inui, that means that if she does bathe on Yom Kippur, she's in violation of inui, and therefore what? Halacha l'maisa should get kares. To which the Gemara says, no, here's the difference. Amar Rava, me'in yana dikra. Rava says really it's all based on the pasuk. How so? So listen to this. Gabi Yom Kippur l'chsiv. When it comes to Yom Kippur, what's lashon on the pasuk? T'siv tanu es nafsho seichem. But say the Gemara Torah uses lashon of tanu means actively now afflict yourselves. Milsa diyada inuya hashda rechitza lo yada inuya dasha. We'll say this is incredible. Let's take a step back. When does the inui of rechitza take effect? We'll say, in other words, when does not bathing become something afflictive in nature? When? Sometime later. In other words, we'll say, it's not like right now. It's after a day of not bathing, 2 days of not bathing, right? 3 days. That's when it becomes afflictive. So what's this incredible? When it comes to Yom Kippur, the things that you are liable for, kares, are things, tanuas nafsho seichem, that are afflictive right now. What's an example of something that's presently afflictive? Not eating, not drinking. Right now, when I'm not eating and not drinking, that's presently afflictive. Bathing is afflictive, but the afflictive nature of not bathing is only felt sometime later on. The afflictive nature of not bathing is not really felt right now. That's why, again, if you bathe on Yom Kippur, it's asr, and it's asr midaraisa, but it's not going to carry kares, because the only forms of kares, you only get kares for things that the effects of their affliction could be felt in the present. The Gemara says, however, conversely, Gabi Nedarim d'chsiv kol neder v'chol shvuas isra lanos nafesh. So we'll say, if you're interested, if you look at the lashon over here, kol neder v'chol shvuas isra, any neder, any shvua, lanos nafesh. So we'll say, what does lanos nafesh mean? Lanos nafesh, that even will be afflictive. What does will be afflictive mean? Even if it's not afflictive right now, but can be afflictive in the future, ultimately that's called the neder of inui nefesh. Milsa da asya lide inui. This is ultimately even something which can become afflictive. V'chilo rachza asya lide inui. And I will say, if she doesn't bathe, ultimately, again, that is going to become afflicted. So we'll say, so very interesting. So in other words, the fact that you don't get kares for bathing on Yom Kippur does not mean that bathing is not afflictive or not bathing is not afflictive. It's just two different halachas. By Yom Kippur, you only get kares for things which are presently afflictive right now, which is eating and drinking, right? But lamais, again, bathing is not presently afflictive. By Nedarim, what we look at is any circumstance which can become afflictive, and clearly, again, not bathing will become afflictive. Incredible. So we'll say, now watch this. V'rami Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yossi. Now we're going to pose the contradiction of Rabbi Yossi himself. We'll start this, but we'll finish this tomorrow. This is an incredible piece. Listen to this. Mayan Shabbanei Yer. So we'll say, here's the case. Here's the case. Imagine you have two cities, city A, city B. Now we'll say, the way it works is they share a water source. But the water flows from A to B. That's the way it works. So the share a water source flows from A to B. Now watch this. So Mayin Shabbanei Yer, Chayen v'chaye acherim, Chayen kodmin, v'chaye acherim. I'll say, here's the case. In this case over here, the water source only provides enough water for one city. So if city A draws their water, what's going to happen? There's nothing left for B. So we'll say, what's talacha? What's talacha? A has the right to draw the water. Why? Chayecha kodmin. Your life comes before someone else's life. So we're very sorry. We're very sorry that there's not going to be enough water for the inhabitants of city B. But Lamais, again, city A has the right to utilize the water source. Behemtam ubehemas acherim. Behemtam kodas, same idea. But let's say there's enough water to sustain the residents of A and B, but there's only enough water for the livestock of A, not enough water for the livestock of B. And if, again, I will say the case over here is if A draws the water for their livestock, there's no water for the livestock of B. What's the halacha? Your money comes before someone else's money. Okay. So again, I will say that's presupposing there's enough for city B to live. Right? So halacha, again, my livestock comes before the livestock of someone else. Now watch this. I will say what happens if, again, there's only enough water to launder the clothing of city A, but not city B. So what's the halacha? Ultimately, again, my laundering needs come before someone else's laundering needs. What happens if chaye achirim kvisasan? So now, what happens if halacha l'maisa there's either enough water for the residents of city A to launder their clothing, but that's going to come at the expense of the drinking water of city B. So in other words, so city A can take care of their laundering needs, but then there's no drinking water left for city B. Then what's the halacha? Chaye achirim kodum kvisasan. Ultimately, again, the drinking water, obviously, of city B comes before the laundering needs of city A. Rabbi Yossi says, no. What says wild? Kvisasan kodemes l'chaye acherim. Rabbi Yossi says the need for city A to launder their clothing comes even before the drinking water needs of city B. Incredible. So the Gemara says, 1 second. Hashta kvisam Rabbi Yossi yesh batzar. Yesh batzar, right? So I'll say, if Rabbi Yossi is saying that not laundering your clothing is an incredible tsar. Top of Pei Aleph. Guf kula lo kol shekain. Certainly he should hold that bathing is certainly in your nefesh. Rabbi say, I'm going to leave you on the cliffhanger. Sorry, you got to come back on Shabbos. So we'll stop over here for today. So just again, happy to see tomorrow is in a magnificently beautiful daf. Some agarata, some halacha. But again, the reconciliation of Shittas Rabbi Yossi Rabbi say, Mirz Hashem, tomorrow. Shkoyach. All right, Chevron Zoom, have a great Shabbos, everyone. Good to see Eretz Yisrael, Florida, South Africa, Mamish, Kibbutz Galios. All right, Chevron, have a great Shabbos. Supposed to learn with all of you.